An Honorable Profession is brought to you by Tech for America, an organization dedicated to providing a platform to solve America's toughest public challenges. For more information, visit T4A.org. That's T4A.org. Also, welcome to our new sponsor, OpenCounter.com. OpenCounter builds tools for local governments that help them deliver permits and licenses to residents online. Their portals guide applicants through complex permitting workflows so applicants can understand and invest in their community. Designed to lower transaction costs, increase transparency, and empower economic development, OpenCounter is a vital tool for communities big and small across this nation, including Atlanta, Charlotte, Indianapolis, Oakland, and San Diego. Check out OpenCounter.com to see what they can do to modernize your community's approach to permitting and licensing. Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm your host, Ryan Coonerty. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports some of the most thoughtful and innovative voices in American politics. If you don't believe me, listen to some of our past episodes with guests like Pete Buttigieg, St. Louis Treasurer Tishara Jones, Congressman Ben McAdams, and more than a dozen amazing leaders at the state and local level. You can find us at newdealleaders.org or wherever podcasts are found. Today, I'm talking with Mandela Barnes, the new Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin. I'm excited for you to hear from this dynamic and engaging leader from the heartland. Mandela grew up in Milwaukee. He left to go to college, worked a variety of jobs before being elected to the state legislature, then statewide office. He's 32 years old, the first African-American lieutenant governor in Wisconsin history, and a leading advocate on issues of climate change and equity. He's a big deal, and as you can tell from our conversation, he's destined to do even bigger things. Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, thank you for joining us on An Honorable Profession today. It's a pleasure to be talking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm honored to be here.
I want to talk first about your path into politics. What inspired you to run? And tell me about that first campaign, that first knocking on a door, making a fundraising call. What was that like for you?
Yeah, man, I'll tell you, it definitely was not a straight line, the path to politics. There were lots of zigs and lots of zags. It started off, college, I was very involved in student government, NAACP. I mean, even in high school, I was part of different community service organizations. But it was once I finished college, 2008, I went to work as a field organizer in Northwest Louisiana on a congressional race, and we lost that race by 350 votes. I know, heartbreaking. And then I made my way back to Milwaukee 10 years ago in January of 2009. Ended up doing an unpaid internship in the mayor's office, ended up working a job, getting laid off here and there, doing temporary stuff, bartending, it just all sorts of things. Like I said, it just was not a straight line. And then I got back into organizing for an interfaith social justice group called MICA. We worked on issues of jobs and economic development, education, immigration reform, and treatment instead of prison. And it was working on those issues, seeing the state level impact that could or could not be made on those issues, what prompted me to run for office. And I ran for state rep in 2012. Making the first fundraising call was very weird. Having worked, that's one thing too. Always, when people ask, when say they are thinking about running for office and they ask what should they do, I always say you should probably go work on a campaign first. You don't even have to be paid. Just go volunteer. Just learn it ins and outs. Spend a week on a campaign just to know if it's for you, because it can look easy if you're not a part of a campaign every day and seeing the inner workings or having to deal with it. But making that first fundraising call, it was weird. We did it. We pulled it off and won that race.
You're born and raised in Milwaukee.
Yeah, born and raised in the city of Milwaukee. Left for school. Like I said, went to Alabama A&M University. Finished there in 2008 and came back home. So my mother's originally from Birmingham. That's a family school. And
how do you, when you come from the community, how do you engage your community as returning home? You want to bring new ideas. You want to bring promises of equity and opportunity to communities that haven't always felt that way from their state government. What's that?
So we're talking about all the way back to 2009, right?
Yeah.
So coming home, this was my first time living in Milwaukee as an adult. I was 16 when I started college. So this is me coming back home, 22 years old at the time, and just realizing that I couldn't just jump into politics and just run for office right away. I needed to, establish some roots, actually put in the work. And I think that's where people oftentimes get confused too. Want to show back or come back home as some sort of savior. And, people don't really like that, especially there are people who've put in the work, who've been doing the organizing, who've been, working diligently to make change. I think it's important for people to get involved in that side before just saying, I'm just going to run for office now. This is the thing. This is what I have to do. You people need to be saved by me. Because you get a whole lot of that.
I always tell people, coach a kid's soccer team.
Yeah,
do something that's real. That is showing people that you're in the life of the community before you start asking people to vote for you.
Exactly. So I did exactly what I felt would get me the most in touch, and I knocked on a lot of doors. Whether it's volunteers or campaign, but actual doors of people like my senator, my congresswoman, and my mayor ultimately, and. This was after college, after I worked, and they said, well, we got an unpaid internship. It was like the pursuit of happiness. So I had to do this unpaid internship. And then the receptionist position opened up, and me on my jobless high horse turned down that job because I didn't see that as a part of my path. And that was not a good decision, and my dad was very frustrated because I was living in his house and not paying bills. And fortunately they came back the next week and were like, hey, the office knows you know the office, and we know this isn't necessarily what you plan to be doing for the next 5 years, but if you can help us out for the next 5 months, that would be very, very helpful. And it was the best decision. Luckily I got that second chance, because people don't always get that second chance. But, being the receptionist in the mayor's office, the mayor doesn't just walk out and greet you when you show up. So whether it was the governor or any other guest who showed up for a meeting with the mayor, they had to sit at least 3 minutes with me, and there's a door that separates the office. I could ask whatever I wanted to ask, and I could build those relationships with people around the city, be it developers, teachers, other local elected officials, and I was able to do that, and I met a lot of people through that job, and it was the most important decision that I made in my entire political career.
That's a good life lesson for everyone out there, but especially for our younger listeners, right? Which is,
it is an honorable profession.
It's an honorable profession, and get yourself in the door, do what needs to get done, and if you show worth, you can. There's a lot of opportunities that open up for you.
I heard every story too from people. People call the mayor's office for anything, whether it's garbage collection or issues with that are federal. And, you hear it all. You get a real pulse of what's going on. So that is how I spent my time. It got me, it was a crash course in getting in touch. It's easy to just show up and think what people are thinking or feeling, but until you've actually heard from them, you have no idea.
And you look at your career path, there's an interesting progression there, which is you're talking first hyper-local mayor's office, trash being picked up, a building being redeveloped. Then you go to the state legislature. You're still representing a district and a community that you're from, that but you're voting on statewide issues. Then you run for lieutenant governor, and that is now a statewide office. The state as a whole looks very different than your Milwaukee neighborhood that you're representing. How do you take your values and what you learned and what you're trying to get done and translate that on a statewide basis?
Yeah, so, fortunately in the assembly, I got to represent the area where I spent the majority of my life. But in between the state assembly and lieutenant governor, there was still that loss for state senate. And I think it's very important. I bring that up all the time. I bring that up more than I bring up winning my first race for state rep, because that is another important part in the journey. Having lost that state senate race, it humbled me, right? And I learned a lot of lessons in that race.
For the listeners at home, you took on Lena Taylor, who I know Lena. She's a force of nature. longtime state senator, and in a primary, and was unsuccessful. But it is. I mean, we had Pete Buttigieg on the show, and he was talking about the importance of the losses. He learned more from his loss race than he did from some of the races he's won. So talk about that race. I was
wildly unsuccessful in that race. It was. I used to say it was 60-40, but now I'm comfortable enough to tell the truth. It was 61-39, and just knocking on those doors, still talking to people, you sort of realize that it was tough. Like, even if there were issues that people may not have seen eye to eye with her on at the doors, there was still that familiarity that people had and weren't necessarily willing to break. And Wisconsin, we get we get a certain way about our elected officials. It's not easy taking on incumbents, whether it's intra-party or partisan, Democrats versus Republicans. It's not an easy task. We get comfortable. We start to like people, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
And you can't win every race. I thought I could use the same formula that I used in 2012, but that just wasn't the case. That didn't happen that way.
And tell me, I mean, normally you try to primary somebody, you're punished for a while.
Yeah.
But you quickly rebuilt relationships in order to run statewide,
and that was the thing. Had I not run that race, honestly, I wouldn't have been able to run for lieutenant governor. I was still able, in that defeat, like the support that I was able to get, the people I was able to meet, the relationships I was able to build, it mattered more long term. So had I not taken on that challenge, I would be in the state assembly right now, and I doubt that I would have run for lieutenant governor from the state assembly. If I won that race, I would have been halfway through my first term in the state Senate, still learning the ropes in a different chamber, and I doubt that I would have run for lieutenant governor. And so taking those relationships that I built, I kept in touch with people, stayed active in party politics in Wisconsin, ended up working for a group called SIX, where we did research and policy support for progressive state legislators across the country. And I was able to separate myself and give myself the time that I needed, where I wasn't just home every day thinking about it. I got to travel. I had a very heavy travel schedule, so I got to still be involved in party politics on one end, pay the bills on another end, but be in different places across the country and see the exciting work that people were doing in states that weren't Wisconsin. And I was able to take those ideas and come back home and use that as a launch pad and say, well, this is how we can do things better in the state of Wisconsin. And I was able to still take that around as a party official, and still get to know more county party chairs and places 300 miles away from home, and build those relationships and know people and be able to at least try to be some sort of resource.
So I want to talk about that, because Wisconsin is, it's ground zero for essentially the future of our country. Like not only the presidential race, but what's happened with the state legislature, what's happened with redistricting. It's the birthplace of progressivism. It's also the birthplace of where the Koch brothers sort of outlined a strategy to flip a blue state red. What are you seeing in Wisconsin that the rest of us need to know, either because it's going to translate to our state, or because whatever happens in Wisconsin is going to eventually impact the rest of us indirectly?
Yeah, that's the thing. In a state like Wisconsin, it's simple. People want to be heard. People have been ignored, left behind for a long time by both parties. But the candidate that can come in and have that conversation with the voters, just to let them know that there's hope, and that as an elected representative, you will keep their best interests. Donald Trump got 6,000 fewer votes than Mitt Romney in Wisconsin. It wasn't some level of popularity that he had in Wisconsin. He didn't get 50% of the vote, but it was that real connection that voters were looking for that they didn't necessarily get in 2016. And so we were very intentional in our race about reaching as many people as possible. We wanted to expand the electorate. We wanted to make sure that we were engaged authentically in communities of color, making sure that we were engaging authentically with younger voters. And the way that happens is just through conversation. It's not simple to it's not a simple task to carry out, but the concept is more simple than we try to make it. Than consultants or political theorists tend to try to make it. Yeah, you go there, you talk to people, you have those conversations. Now, they can go any kind of way, but you at least have to show up. And that is, you can't communicate everything just through the airwaves. Obviously that part of campaigning has to exist. But if you look at, I'll say 2014, we ran and having a message, talking about who you are, not just being anti the other person. If we just run a campaign against Donald Trump, we're going to lose. And that was the case with us in 2010 and the recall in 2012. And in 2014, it was just a very anti-Scott Walker campaign. As an active person, I could not tell you what our message was in those years. And that was a big part of the problem. If I can't tell you what we stand for, what we're running on, then I know the casual voter who may or may not show up in a midterm election is definitely not going to know. And, you look at the money that was spent I'll use 2014 as an example. The money that was spent on commercials, TV ads, and from our top of the ticket candidate, and you look at our candidate for state treasurer, for example, in 2014, the vote difference was not that much different given the amount of money that was spent. People voting straight party lines, but you look at who got the actual bang for their buck. I think our candidate for state treasurer in 2014 didn't spend over like $50,000 compared to millions at the top of the ticket to get the same exact result. That meant that there was just a real disconnect with people, a disconnect that there's no amount of money that can make that connection.
How do you connect? You have to, now you're running statewide, and you're running in urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas. How do you make sure you connect with all those different communities and individuals in a way that is authentic, in a way that matters?
So the most authentic thing you can do is talk about the same things wherever you go. I don't ever switch up my message. Like I'll talk about the same things in Milwaukee as I will in Hudson. Because there are very serious issues that are impacted all across the state in the same way: education issues, economic issues, environmental issues. We're feeling them everywhere, and people can relate to those issues. They are the bread and butter things that people feel when they leave the house and they come back home, and we have to address it. We have to address those issues in a real way. We have to talk about them. We have to be able to provide solutions as well. And, I can talk about agriculture in Milwaukee too, because, what goes on in more rural parts of Wisconsin impact the city of Milwaukee as well. And I'll talk about what's going on with the high rate of poverty in the city of Milwaukee when I get farther out state, because that's going to impact. I talk about prison population. I talk about criminal justice reform all across the state, because we have to understand that we have to achieve the same goals together. There's not any part of the state we can support more than the other. So it's funny because that sounds simple, but it's not happening in American politics. Yeah. And if you look at all the people running for president and the National Party, it's all been these little micro conversations, and they aren't talking. They aren't employing that strategy, or very few of them are. What are you seeing in Wisconsin in terms of how the National Democratic Party and national candidates are engaging? Are they being successful? Are they learning a lesson from 2016? How are we doing? I do think so. I think lessons are learned, and there are so many candidates in the race, which I come to accept as a good thing. Last year, our primary for governor, we had about 16 candidates. There were 10 who ended up on the ballot, and it proved to be a successful approach, because you have so many people, and then you have to fight for your own, little pockets. You have to go out there and find new voters. You have to be able to energize or tap into a voting block that hasn't been tapped into. So it forces the candidates to do a little more work, because majority of the people are talking about the same things, or a parallel version of the same exact issues. So it means that more people are going across the country, not just talking about how awful this president is, but they're talking about their ideas. And so I do think they are doing I think it's a much better job. It was a 2-person race 4 years ago, and that race, it was different. It was much different. It was who people thought was going to be our next president, and there was sort of a pushback against that. People were upset with what they felt as being establishment politics. So there was Bernie Sanders came out, and he had a level of success. I mean, you can't take that away from him at all, because he energized a lot of people, younger people, was able to get people fired up. And right now, with there being so many people, so many candidates in the race, that the energy is just there, just by the sheer volume of candidates.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, just for the listeners at home who may be just sort of first thinking about politics, what's a lieutenant governor do on a daily basis? Is it fun?
Yeah.
Is it the job you thought it would be? Just give people a little sense of it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the role of lieutenant governor varies state to state. Some states you preside over the Senate. Some states, the lieutenant governor is viewed as a cabinet level officer. In Wisconsin, is a very fluid role. And I think that's the best part about it. The duties are predicated upon the relationship that you have with the governor. Have a good relationship with the governor, so it's less of a you go do this and more of a what are you interested in doing. And so I'm really excited to get to work on environment and energy issues, because I think that is where we have the best opportunity in a state like Wisconsin. I think across the United States, that's where we should be focusing our efforts, because there's so many other implications. There's the healthcare implication. There's the economic implication. There's so many just opportunities that even just the need to just do something better as far as our environment is concerned, because we haven't been doing things the right way, and we are feeling the impact of that. Whether it's these extreme weather events, or whether it's just the level of carbon in the air. You look at contaminants; people are just getting sick. Whether it's water quality, air quality, and we've been derelict in our duties as a nation and as states. And so, with that being said, working to lead our efforts on energy sustainability, and also promoting equity issues.
And tell me, and I want to talk about equity issues, but first on the environment, on climate change, you become a national leader on that issue in a very short period of time. Tell me, what are you doing in the state, and what do you see as the future? What do you think we can achieve in the next couple of years? Understanding that we're not going to see any progress at the national level, so it's all down to the state and local level.
And so, I'm glad you mentioned the local level. So besides from getting the low-hanging fruit in the budget, the 2015 carbon-free goal, money for research, so our universities could be more involved in the process to help drive that change, because like I always say, the technology that exists today is going to be different in the next 10 years, going to be different in the next 5 years. And also promoting, doing our best job to promote, again, the economic side of it as well, because I was having a conversation, or yesterday during the panel, a friend of mine, Representative Chris Harris from the eastern part of Kentucky, brought up the fact that, coal miners are, it's a real thing, losing their jobs. And I brought up the fact, too, that, yes, I completely sympathize with them. These are working people. I can sympathize with them the same way that I sympathize with people who are being laid off, or, their plants are shutting down. People who are in the automotive industry. My dad was a factory worker, so I get that. My sympathy is the same for those coal miners as it is for those people whose plants are shutting down, which is why leading with the economic message is more beneficial to the cause. Instead of saying, oh, we'll find you a job later, we'll retrain you once we get to this place. We need to have those jobs in place. We need to have a robust, solar, wind manufacturing operation ready to go, or else this stuff is going to be happening all overseas. We need to lead that revolution here in the United States, and I want to make sure that Wisconsin is on the front end of that, because we have a rich manufacturing tradition and heritage in the state of Wisconsin, and people who are ready to work in that industry, and that's where the job growth is happening across the country. Job growth in the renewable energy sector is outpacing job growth in all other sectors, and that's just where we have to be as a state, my home state of Wisconsin and this entire country. And I will say also with the local level, because we do have a legislature who is not on board. In Wisconsin, they are hostile towards everything that we're doing. We are looking to create an office of sustainability and clean energy in Wisconsin that would be the driving force for the change, that would make sure that, whether it's public buildings, private buildings, looking to be very innovative in the way that we approach pushing back against climate change and creating a new clean energy economy in Wisconsin. But where the legislature will presumably fail to act, we do have, I want to say, 40-something mayors across Wisconsin, maybe more, who've signed on to meet the standards of the Paris Climate Accord. And with those mayors, they represent a majority of people in the state of Wisconsin. So let's lead locally. Let's lead locally with the help of the state.
You gotta, at this point, you gotta just find your spot, yep, right, and take every advantage.
Yeah, and if those cities, if they can get to those goals, that would be a great deal. That would serve a great deal as far as Wisconsin meeting the goals without the help of the legislature.
Right, and it also proves you can do it. Right?
It proves that you can do it,
and have a good economy as a result, which makes it hard to argue to voters that this is going to destroy their lives. Let's talk about equity. So you're the first African American lieutenant governor in Wisconsin. There's, I think, the 6% African American population, yep, and so you're an important voice for equity for a minority population in more ways than one. How do you talk about equity, and what are you doing to make sure that there is true equity in your state?
Yeah, so with the 6% state population, our prison population is over 50% Black. And with that being said, regardless of where you go in the state, that number matters, because those are tax dollars. You look at the rate of people who are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses, or people who are incarcerated for a lack of opportunity. People who are in jail now we're in Colorado at the moment, so people who are in jail for what people are getting rich off of right here in this state and many others. And so that's a real problem, looking at the way sentencing has happened in Wisconsin. The old governor, when he was in the legislature, he was the author of Truth in Sentencing. People who could be done serving their time are still sitting behind bars. People with health issues, people who are at an age where even if they try to commit a crime, they would not be successful. And looking at the rate of people with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and how we address that. Now the conversation is changing more towards treatment, but we still aren't there yet. We still aren't at our capacity for what we could be doing. We could be spending much less money addressing people's actual needs instead of incarcerating them. And that, like I said, that matters all across the state.
Is that resonating with your Republican legislature? In that, are they willing to look at criminal justice reform?
So, you got some people. Grover Norquist had his Right on Crime tour. And, he came to Wisconsin, I want to say in 2015. And I thought that was going to be it. I thought, all right, we're actually going to see some movement, and we didn't, which is unfortunate. There are people who talk about it. They seem like they want to do something, but it has been a very slow-moving process.
In terms of other equity issues, how you're carrying a load on your shoulders,
a whole lot.
A whole lot. Tell me, what else are you working on to try to make?
So you look at achievement in schools, right? We have our Black student achievement, our white student achievement. That is the biggest gap in the nation. But again, that goes back to an opportunity gap. A lot of that, if you look at student outcomes, that stuff is very much connected to economic outcomes as well. Students who are living in poverty tend to not perform at the same level. And obviously, you show up to school on an empty stomach, it's going to be much harder for you to learn. If you got a lot of kids don't have clothes and won't show up to school, like access to washers and dryers, like some of that stuff, that you just don't really realize. You expect the thought from so many leaders is that everybody shows up to school with the same tools. Everybody shows up to school at the same level, and that's not the case. It's not at all. Access to health care. Again, my same refrain, where healthcare is accessible, it's not always affordable, or it's affordable, it's not always accessible. Students who may be insured through our state Medicaid program doesn't mean they get to those doctor visits as they should. And that impacts the way the students learn, physical health, mental health issues. So to the extent that we can do a better job, and there is money in the budget to get school social workers into those buildings that can diagnose issues and make sure that students get the treatment that they need so that they can be successful in the classroom. I mean, that's how we change educational outcomes. We need to make sure that everybody is on a level playing field, and a lot of those other problems start to sort themselves out.
That makes sense. One last question. You are an energetic and optimistic voice within the National Democratic Party. Yet you are, Wisconsin is politics right now. It's like a blood sport of real gridlock. How do you maintain your optimism about politics, about the opportunities in government right now?
Yeah, I'm optimistic that things can change. I mean, we have to be. We don't have a choice but to be optimistic. What's the point of why even be here if I don't think that things could be better? There are a lot of people who are optimistic about taking things the other way, and they're ready to do it right away. And any chance they get to take us backwards, they will. So with that being said, we have to come back with the same exact energy, even more energy, when it comes to improving the lives of people across this country, people who need help the most. And I look at a lot of, whether it's my background, whether it's neighborhood schools I went to, and I see people whose lives went totally different directions, and there was not a whole lot different about our upcomings, our upbringing. And I think, oddly enough, that's one of the things that gives me more hope and energy to do this work, because if one small thing could have changed, maybe that person wouldn't have ended up in the bad situation that they did. And I think that we have a responsibility, again, to at least provide opportunity. We don't have to give everybody everything. We have to just make sure that opportunity exists for people.
That's a great way to look at it. Mandela Barnes, thank you for being an optimistic voice and for also bringing the energy that you do to American politics. It makes a big difference, not only in Wisconsin, but nationwide.
Oh, man, I appreciate you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to An Honorable Profession. Please subscribe to hear more amazing leaders, and keep asking your elected officials to be honorable. Boots Row Group produced this podcast. I'm Ryan Coonerty, and because we're keeping things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.